Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. The mating rituals of the specimen Homo nerdiculus, aka D&D players, is quite fantastic. While a regular Homo sapien might try to woo a female in the wild by swiping right on Tinder, only to be rejected when she finds out that he isn't 6 foot, Homo nerdiculus has to go and make things weird. We've seen it time and time again where an unreciprocated crush makes D&D a less than enjoyable experience for everyone involved. But every once in a while, these creatures once thought destined for extinction throw something at the wall and it sticks. Viscous and covered in slime, but boy oh boy does it stick. Yes, dear listener, sometimes people who play RPGs can actually attract a member of the opposite gender. Of course, I'm exaggerating for the sake of mediocre comedy, but it's still nice to see someone score a W every once in a while. However, the trick to dating isn't getting a girlfriend, oh no. It's holding on to one that's the tough part. As the subject of today's story will demonstrate, there is definitely a wrong way to do it. The story I have for you today stars a player who witnesses firsthand how a person's in-game weirdness can be somewhat detrimental to a real-life relationship. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes to us from Reddit user ArcaneShadow7470 and is titled Player Destroys Relationship and Ends Campaign in a Single Stroke, before it even started. This story is about a game that never got past Session 0 due to the awkwardness created by a specific player in response to trying to force the others to implement character backstories for everyone that only suited him. To set the scene, I have been at the DM for most of my group's games for over a decade. I was still running a small adventure, using 5e, which had just come out at the time, for several newbies who had expressed interest in RPGs and wanted to learn the ropes. Joining us was a longtime veteran of my games from the group that I usually run with. In retrospect, I should have seen the red flags before ever having started the session, as this veteran player has had some issues with other members of my regular group in the past, due to having the "my guy" and "main character" syndromes. However, he insisted on joining to help the others learn, as one of them was his girlfriend that he had just met, and he wished to be there to personally help her get a grasp of the rules. The players were 5 in total, though this story mainly concerns the aforementioned couple, who we will refer to by their classes, Paladin and Ranger. The party consisted of a rogue, a paladin, the veteran player, a ranger, his girlfriend, a sorcerer, his girlfriend's sister, a cleric, and of course, myself as the GM. We began Session 0 by explaining the basics of how to roll up characters by choosing race, class, backgrounds, the usual stuff. A few of the players wanted help writing up their backstories, as they had only had a general concept of what they wanted their characters to be like, but needed assistance in fleshing out the details to help them with the setting. We were playing in the Forgotten Realms. Ranger begins by stating that she wanted to be a hardcore survivalist, who grew up alone in the woods using the trope of literally being raised by wolves. She had no notion of civilized mannerisms, and no idea who her parents were. This will become important shortly. We worked out together that it was most likely that her human parent abandoned her. She was a half-elf, on the edge of the high forest of Faerun to be raised by the elven people due to financial problems, and due to the stigma of being raised as a half-blood child. Her elven parent left immediately after her birth. Rather than being adopted by the elves, they shunned her as well. And it was finally a lone druid who found her and took her in, teaching her the ways of natural balance and the cycle of life. Paladin also decided to write up his character's past as being from the High Forest, so that there was an easy way to link his character to that of his girlfriend. He was a courtier from the fallen realm of Erlan, which was once the kingdom of the elves of the High Forest before it fell to ruin. This would make him well over 500 years old. Another red flag, but I did warn him that this character would not suddenly be a master of history and knowledge simply because of his age. He wanders the forest looking for relics of the ancient past to preserve, and seeks a renewal of the elven lands as a way to uphold his oath to the ancients. This is where the problem begins. Paladin suddenly decides that it would be cool if, as a way to further link their characters' fates together, Ranger would agree to have her parents be known to him as friends or descendants on her elven side, to this fallen realm that he used to protect. She reluctantly agrees, but makes it clear that she still does not know her parents, and therefore does not know him yet. The link between them would be tenuous at best. She is also not interested in the politics of the Elven realms, fallen or otherwise. She just wants to hunt and scout. This apparently did not work for him, as he continued to write in his backstory that not only does he know her parents now, suddenly her elven parent is actually descended from the line of royalty that he was sworn to protect. So it is now his duty to defend her. She is, after all, the heir to the royal lineage with this sudden rewrite. Ranger was having none of it, saying that it made no sense. Why would Paladin have allowed her to be abandoned in the woods this whole time? Why not raise her himself instead of risking her to the wilds? His response caused me to do a double take and elicited a few groans from around the table. He would not have had the heart to raise her as a daughter. For from the moment he laid eyes upon her when she was born, apparently he watched the birth, he knew that she was destined to be his true love. He would watch over her from that point on, always at a distance, making sure no harm ever befell her in the forest. Ew! Could you all excuse me for just one moment, please? Okay, I'm back. So, that whole backstory has the one horrible thing wrong with it, but you don't need me to tell you about that. If you can't figure it out by yourself, your education needs to be done not with a cartoon dragon, but with the receiving end of a brick. Instead, I'm gonna go ahead and use this opportunity to talk about the other issue that our guy keeps trying to push here. Joint backstories are like Siamese twins. You either got a friend for life or a parasite that steals your lungs. Joining your backstories can add a new depth of options to character interactions while also adding a bit of team play to the roleplay pillar of the game. However, like with real relationships, it's all give and take. Your contribution to each other's backstories needs to be complementary and enable the character that each person wants to play. If your character's bond with another character actively prevents your partner from playing the character that they want to play, then what's the point? The whole reason to do a joint backstory is to create unique role-playing opportunities, which is immediately thrown out the window if it's that exact joint backstory that takes away options from another player. At that point, you're not a lot better than a DMPC when it comes to destroying player agency. Let's take a look at Paladin's backstory here. The whole, I knew your ancestors because they're actually royalty from my backstory, actively sullies the Ranger's notion of rugged survivalist that they wanted to go for. Believe it or not, but I think that the Kodiaks would be having themselves a royal banquet if King Charles decided to go for a weekend survival trip in Alaska. If you're not actively supporting your partner's backstory, then what's the point? Instead, try to make it so that your character's existence improves the concept that the other character is trying to go for. Maybe Paladin's character is so incredibly inept at wilderness survival that they need Ranger's help to navigate the wilds, and in exchange, Paladin helps Ranger navigate more civilized countries. Now each character gets to play into their strengths and foster an environment for a bond to grow organically. Now, where were we again? Oh, right. Stalking an infant. There are so many things to dissect from that line, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory why nobody should be writing stories about how 500-year-old men suddenly fall in love with infants and stalk them until maturity. Ranger immediately ripped her character sheet out of his hands and began yelling at him, saying that there was no way she was going to use that disgusting idea and that she was forcing his character onto hers through the use of her backstory. She wanted help writing one, but he had no business narrating to her the plot of her entire life up to this point without her having any say in it. I tried to interject, saying that he might have indeed be getting a bit heavy-handed with forcing details into her character's history, but he just ignored this response and kept arguing that it was in everyone's best interest to let him weave a connection between the characters. It was at this point that Sorcerer finally spoke up, saying that Paladin was bringing main character syndrome to the game. by forcing both his and her characters to be arbitrarily important to the setting. Rogue agreed, stating that so far Paladin has been showering Ranger with unwanted favoritism, and that everyone else was feeling left out while I, the GM, was unsuccessfully trying to defuse the tension and salvage the situation. Paladin responded by saying that he was clearly more knowledgeable than them for having played much longer, and even went so far as to call both Rogue and Sorcerer idiots. He said that if they did not want his help, they should leave. They did. So did Ranger, who immediately broke up with him on the spot. As he stormed out, I was struck in the awkward situation of trying to console Ranger while also telling everyone that the session was over and that I would be going home. I later contacted everyone except Paladin over Messenger, asking if they were willing to try again with a new Session 0. They replied that this experience left a sour taste in their mouth, and that it might be a long time before they attempted another RPG again. And that is how a disastrous Session 0 ended the adventure before it ever began. TLDR. One player forces an awkward romance plot into his girlfriend's character's backstory by inserting his own character into it, and claiming that she is secretly royalty who he immediately fell in love with when she was born. He was a 500-year-old elf. She breaks up with him IRL, and everyone awkwardly leaves Session 0, vowing to never touch an RPG for a while. End of story. Easy come, easy go. Don't worry, buddy, there's plenty of fish in the sea. With the lifespan of an elf, it's only a matter of time before the next baby comes around, or you get stabbed in prison, whichever comes first. Legolas's prison shanking aside, when you take a step back and really examine what's going on here, there is really only one way that this was gonna play out. I think that Paladin's behavior here is indicative of other behaviors that we didn't really see going on behind the scenes. Yeah, the overbearing and creepy backstory was weird and overbearing, but overall, in the grand scheme of a relationship, it really wasn't a big deal. I think that it was much more that this was a straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. Who could have ever guessed that the overbearing and creepy backstory would come from a guy who was overbearing and creepy? Color me surprised! Speaking of coloring things, let's go ahead and take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer V. Woolard, who actually made custom Drake dice. Sanded, polished, and entombed within are actual snakeskin pieces. Yeah, these dice are pretty freaking sweet. And the best part? They never roll above a 10, which is very in character for who they're based off of, considering how everything up to this point has been a menagerie of accidents and critical failures. You can actually see this phenomenon in action over on Crispy's Tavern, where I participate in his D&D campaign Shadow over Carconos. It's a sight to behold. Link is in the description. Thank you again, V, for submitting your art. I've went ahead and included a link to their Etsy shop down below. You should definitely go check them out. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you wish to support the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.